Good morning, and welcome to your morning cereal. Okay, good morning, and welcome to Monday. Wow, what a Super Bowl. That was one for the ages, and I can't believe that ending. Who would have thought the insert winning team's name here would have pulled that out in the very last play? And how did they get the Budweiser horses to do that? And Kelsey's and Taylor's incredibly vicious and public breakup during the halftime show? I did not see that coming. Well, clearly I haven't seen the game yet because I record these before the game happened, but I hope it proved out to be just as entertaining. I also hope you are recovering from one of the biggest eating and snacking days of the year. And just in case you have room for more, today is National Cream Cheese Brownie Day. Also, and I'm not kidding here, it's National Poop Day. So maybe that's timely. And just a quick public service reminder here, we have 130 days until summer and to be beach body ready. So there's no time to waste. Maybe one of today's quotes will inspire us to lose that winter weight. Well, let's find out now because as usual, we have one fun and nostalgic quote and then a second quote to tease our book review later in the episode. Hopefully, one of these quotes will speak to you and kickstart your week in a positive direction. All right. Here's the first quote, and it's our second time quoting Jim Carrey. And he said, quote, "As far as I can tell, it's just about letting the universe know what you want and then working towards it, while letting go of how it comes to pass," end quote. And I like this. It's similar to how I think about the opportunities life gives us. At times, life will open doors for you, but it's incumbent on you to actually step forward in faith and in confidence and walk through that door. You have no chance if you don't take action. And today's teaser quote from the book review is, "If you argue and rankle and contradict, you may achieve a victory sometimes, but it will be an empty victory because you will never get your opponent's goodwill." And as usual, we'll unpack that here in just a few minutes during the book review segment. But first, let's jump into our usual dose of fun and historic facts from this day in history. Today's news facts and birthdays are for January 10th. In 1940, the first Tom and Jerry cartoon was released. In 1942, Glenn Miller and his orchestra, they were awarded the first ever gold record for selling 1 million copies of the Chattanooga Choo Choo. Then skipping up to 1989, that's when the WWF admitted and shocked the world, I might add, that pro wrestling is an exhibition and not a sport. I can't believe that's not real. And in 1990, the spacecraft Galileo, it flew past Venus on its way to Jupiter. Then in 1993, Michael Jackson granted his first interview in 14 years to none other than Oprah Winfrey at his Neverland Ranch. And the show aired on ABC, and it drew an incredible 90 million viewers. Then in 1996, the supercomputer Deep Blue, you might remember that, it became the first computer to win a chess game against a reigning human world champion. However, Team Human rallied and Garry Kasparov, he proceeded to win the match 4-2. Note that Deep Blue won a rematch in the following year. And then finally, in 2006, the final episode of Arrested Development aired on Fox. Well, happy birthday to you if today is your birthday. You share a birthday with a bunch of TV and radio personalities, Glenn Beck, George Stephanopoulos, and Jim Cramer. Also, U.S. track and field sprinter Justin Gatlin, he's 42. Actress Elizabeth Banks, she's 51. Pro golfer Greg Norman, he's 70. And Roberta Flack, singer of songs like Killing Me Softly, Tonight I Celebrate My Love, and The First Time I Ever Saw Your Face, she turns 88 today. And the number one song on this date is a song that I picked especially in honor of the fact that some of you and your team may not have won the Super Bowl. And with that in mind, the number one song on this date in 1997 was Unbreak My Heart by Toni Braxton. This song was originally intended for Celine Dion, one of my all-time favorites, but Braxton won the Grammy for the song in 1997, and it became one of the best-selling singles of all time, with over 100 million copies sold worldwide. The song was number one for 11 weeks straight, and I highlighted it just in time because it ended its run at number one the week of February 15th. And the number one movie on this date in 1994 was Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, starring Jim Carrey. Now, I've seen this movie scores of times. Yes, I use the word scores, probably more than any other movie I've seen, and most of them sitting on my buddy's couch. Shout out to Mr. Franks. But I haven't seen it in like 25 years, so I think it might be time to reintroduce it to the next generation. So many quotable lines in this movie too, and too many to mention, and I won't put you through the agony of me half-acting those quotes. But one thing I did not know was that Carrey based the character of Ace off of a smart bird, like a cockatiel or a parakeet. The clothing was bright and colorful like a tropical bird, his walk was like a bird, he talked like a bird, and even his haircut was like a bird. Alrighty then. On to some personal growth in the book review segment of the morning serial. This is where we take a few moments to reflect on lessons learned from the current book we're reading. And currently, we're reading through Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's a timeless book that is consistently on all the must-read lists, and it's packed with rock-solid advice and actions for us all to use and build healthy foundational concepts to live by. Last week, we began part 3 of How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is entitled How to Win People to Your Way of Thinking. And Carnegie threw us straight into the deep end with Chapter 1. You can't win an argument, where Carnegie is making the point that there are no winners in an argument, and he left us with a rhyming quote, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still," end quote. Carnegie next tells a story about a car salesman that came to his class because he wasn't being very successful at selling cars. And it turns out that the salesman had a bit of a fiery streak, and he would end up arguing with potential clients if they said anything negative about the cars he was selling, or if they were saying something positive and supportive about the competitor's car. Well, the salesman said he'd come out of these meetings saying that he sure told them something, but he hadn't sold them anything, and that was the problem. And he learned from Carnegie not to argue with his customers. Maybe in hindsight, he could have figured that one out. I mean, I could have told him that. But Carnegie's advice to the salesman was to agree with his clients. If he simply agreed that the competitor's car was better, then there was nothing left to say about it. I mean, what are they going to do? Keep going on and on about it? No, he already had agreed. But with that now aside, the salesman could talk to them about his cars, and he became a much more successful car salesman. Wise old Benjamin Franklin said, quote, "If you argue and rankle and contradict, you may achieve a victory sometimes, but it will be an empty victory because you will never get your opponent's goodwill," end quote. And to this point, Carnegie says it's up to you to decide how you want to handle these situations, asking if you'd rather, quote, "have an academic, theatrical victory or a person's goodwill. You can seldom have both," end quote. Carnegie is saying plain as day that in an argument, we might be right. We might be 100% correct. But even in that case, more often than not, you are not going to change the other person's mind, which means the argument will be in vain. If you don't change the other person's mind, then it's just like you were wrong in the first place. Here, Carnegie unpacks a bit more how people's need to feel important, it is or it can be filled in an argumentative situation. He illustrates this through story. And this story starts with an argument between a tax consultant and a government tax inspector. Well, they were arguing back and forth about who was right regarding a certain tax regulation. The consultant noticed that the more he pushed back, the more the tax inspector was digging in. The consultant said the inspector was, quote, "cold, arrogant, and stubborn." The consultant then changed strategies to stop arguing, to find some appreciation for the inspector. And the consultant told the inspector this was likely a very petty matter in comparison to the important and difficult decisions the tax inspector usually dealt with, and that he, the consultant, got his knowledge from books, whereas the tax inspector's job meant that he was on the front lines getting his experience, and that he wished he had a job like that of the inspectors, as it would teach him a lot. Well, that changed the direction of the conversation. The inspector lightened up as he talked about the difficulties of his job, and again, long story long, the conversation ended up on a friendly note, with the inspector saying that he would look into the matter further, and he eventually came around to the consultant's perspective. Here's the point. People want to feel important. When we choose to argue with someone, they are finding their sense of importance from within by defending their position, puffing up their standing in life, and digging in. Focusing on winning the argument at all costs is what makes them feel important. But as soon as the other person, let's say you and I, as soon as we note the other person's importance, that box is checked. Their defenses fall. They don't have to find importance from within by defending themselves now. We gave it to them freely. And Carnegie says then people are, quote, permitted to expand their ego and become sympathetic and kindly human beings. Let's end today's review and sum it up with a quote from Buddha saying, quote, hatred is never ended by hatred, but by love, end quote. To which Carnegie says, quote, and a misunderstanding is never ended by an argument, but by tact, diplomacy, conciliation, and a sympathetic desire to see the other person's viewpoint, end quote. Well, this lesson on avoiding arguments is timely as we all prepare to argue about the official's terrible call from the game yesterday, or the official's terrible no call from the game yesterday. Either way, thank you for joining today. Come back tomorrow as we finish Chapter 1 and we learn Carnegie's first principle of Part 3 of how to win people to your way of thinking. Head into this week with optimism and the courage to walk through the doors that life opens for you. Take it one step at a time and you'll get there. You've got this. We'll see you tomorrow and have a fantastic day. Don't forget to follow and subscribe to the Morning Serial podcast on the One Life Live It channel. You can find more episodes and videos by visiting our YouTube channel and the website at Sean Inglis and at SeanInglis.com, where you can also follow our other podcasts, the Mr. and Mrs. Inglis podcast and the Life Happens podcast. In these other podcasts, we'll dive deeper into everyday issues, self-improvement and well-being, business and finance, and we welcome special guests too. So join us. It'll be a good time, I promise. Thanks again for listening. Have a fantastic day.